Welcome one, welcome all. We are here for another weekend of NASCAR. So last week we were in Las Vegas and it ended up being a pretty good slate. I remember hopping into the RPS Discord on the way down to Lexington where we had our little RPS get together there for a little party. And I will say it was really fun seeing a lot of the screenshots in there. I was very, very happy with how everyone did. I know Noah Gragson somehow driving that car up into the top six. We also had Ty Gibbs being in the winner, which was kind of unexpected. But other than that, Kyle Larson led the whole way, like we thought. We had a lot of good stuff there. And how'd you fare last week? And I'm going to go ahead and get a list of all the members who won too.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think between the two of us on our course, I think we had like 5 of the winners between the two of us in the course. So that was pretty good. Unfortunately, my construction wasn't. I went on this whole rant last week about construction, and then my construction wasn't as good. So I had a lot of the right plays, but there was just more guys from the. I think you kind of you liked it way more than I did, the place differential guys. So I'm sure you did better than I did last week. But as far as our core plays, yeah, I think it helped out a lot of the subscribers. Our cores were just really good.
Yeah, we had a bunch of guys. So you're going to hear me go through a list here, but I just wanted to shout out everyone who put their screenshots into the chat. Also switched over to the new Run Pure Sports logo to use. And we are also going to be running several contests for those using the logo and chances to win prizes here in the upcoming weeks and months this season, including our March Madness package that will hopefully be available next week. We really had a ton of stuff like Jaw24. He won $100. JCom winning 227. Nicholas and Hadestan, he had a big day. And then Sean Smith too, with the 18K hitter in the main. What was it? The 100K to first contest. He was part of the chop up top with Ty Gibbs there. 18K for him. That's an awesome job by him. Cameron Crazy turning 80 into 267. King Chief 88. King Chief was the guy who won a ton in the Xfinity Series on that Saturday night. And a whole bunch more winners too. If you posted it a little bit earlier, I could spend another 2 to 3 minutes just on the winners alone. But again, greatly appreciate you guys using our logo, being involved in the chat. And obviously we want to produce more winners today here in Phoenix. So let's go ahead and talk about the track a little bit here. So this is a race that NASCAR usually does twice a year stats. We get a lot of data about this track here that we can kind of use for, previous years. And then obviously for this year too. But one big difference is that this year, the Toyotas are absolutely cooking in the long practice run that we had on Friday. So give me your little initial breakdown for what we came into this weekend and what you kind of expect for this race overall.
Yeah, so this is a short track, flat track. It's only a mile. So it's the first one of its kind that we've seen this season. And they're changing the package a little bit. So without getting too technical, just because I don't know if I can get too technical, not my expertise, but they are changing the package. And what you've seen at this track is really hard to pass. So on these types of tracks, these short tracks, these flat tracks, you get out front, you get a lot of dominator points because whoever gets out front early here is going to lead a lot of laps. You potentially could win lead the entire stage one. So that's why we've seen over the last couple of years and really even before that with the next gen cars, though, in the last couple of years, you're seeing the pole sitter has dominated and it has been in the nuts. And you've even had 2 or 3 other guys up in that top 5 to 8 range hit the nuts because it's just because of the difficulty of passing. Now, the way you have to pass here is generally going to be in the pits. So that's where you could really pick up a lot of spots here is in the pit. And so you're going to want to look at some guys maybe who are struggling. Their pit crews are struggling a little bit and they're starting way behind. They may not be as good of a place differential play as you may think. But like you said, the Toyotas have been dominant this week. In practice, you'll see, obviously, we've got Denny Hamlin on the pole. So the Joe Gibbs racing cars look really good. Hendricks, not as good as they have been historically at this track. So, this weekend. So we'll see how it plays out. But it's a little scary when Denny Hamlin is the pole sitter and he practiced he usually doesn't practice that well, and he practiced extremely well. So that, with the history of pole sitters at this track and Hamlin looking as good as he has in practice, with the Toyotas looking as good as they have, that's scary. He could get a ton of Dom points here.
Yeah, and you also got to mention too, like you mentioned earlier about being in the pits and stuff, that number one pit stall for Denny Hamlin, just allowing him to, even if he did make a mistake, like you saw it with Cole Custer yesterday, right? Cole Custer, the number one pit stall, definitely wasn't the best car out in the track there for a little bit and still was able to make the pass in the pits. Like he was able to get by Chandler Smith despite being, multiple seconds behind him. But even with Denny Hamlin's, like, we can lead a large portion of the first stage. He could lose it in the second stage and almost get it back in the pits and stuff too. So that's kind of what makes this poll a little bit more comfortable than other polls too, right? Like you have that pit stall selection does matter. It does make him a little bit better of a play, and also just going down the board too, like all these Toyotas, like. I think I saw a good tweet. I don't know if it was from Jeff Gluck or Chris Knight or whoever it is, but if you guys are interested in fantasy NASCAR stuff, they provide a ton of NASCAR information for free on Twitter. Obviously, they cover the NASCAR for their job. So, but basically, they said that Toyotas were like, 4 of the top 6 in practice, like, 8 of the top 10 or whatever in long stints too. So it definitely looks like that will be the case. A mild track, so dominator points, very important. And we can go ahead and we'll kind of touch in on, stars and scrubs. We'll go from the top. We'll kind of make our way down, and, kind of just going over the best plays too in general. I mean, we got our projections up in the system here too. Denny Hamlin leads the line. And then we also have some hot takes here, a little bit here. Not necessarily hot takes, but some questionable, from what I was making last night. I had Kyle Busch a little bit low and stuff, but we'll touch on the 10K and up range first. Then we'll dive into the what should I say? The 9K and up after that. So let me go ahead and make a filter here on SaberSim if you guys are wondering. Code NASCAR15, 15% off your first purchase. You can get the 15% off the racing package as well, which includes F1, trucks, and Xfinity, as well as the NASCAR Cup Series. One thing to note, too, is that I don't think Xfinity is running next weekend, too. So for whatever it is worth, make sure that you get in whenever you can. So let's go ahead and do salary greater than 9,900 stats. Go ahead and take it from the top here. We'll talk about Denny Hamlin. We'll talk about Christopher Bell, Larson, Blaney, and Byron. What's your initial take on these guys here?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it all starts with Hamlin, like we were just talking about. He's got the pole, and that's just traditionally been a really strong position to be in DFS wise at this track. He should be able to get out front, get a lot of Dom points. I mean, in his recent short flat track performances in his last 5, the worst he's finished is 8th. So he does really well on these type of tracks. So I do anticipate, I mean, he is the chalk play, and I do anticipate that he will get out front. Now, we'll talk about some other guys who are starting in the first few rows that maybe have a potential to get by him. But then you're looking at, most of these other guys outside of Bell, who's starting 7th, are starting a little further back. So they're interesting where you could get some place differential. You've got a guy like Larson. So Larson starting 17th. I said Christopher Bell, so I was looking at the wrong thing. Bell starting 13th. It's Byron starting 5th is interesting. Let me jump into Byron actually for a second, because I think Byron, you're going to see some of these guys who are starting up front are going to be low on. I think Byron will be one of those guys who's low on. Now, Byron won here last year in this same race, right? Did he win last year? Byron won this race. The spring race he won, and then the fall he came in 4th. So he's got some good success here under this type of package. Like I said, they've changed the package slightly. I think they've raised the what do you call it? I can't even think of the whatever it is. The thing on the back of the car on the trailer. The spoiler. There you go. They raised the spoiler, I think, an inch or whatever. But these guys are saying that it really hasn't changed much. What they're hoping, what NASCAR was kind of trying to do was get more passing, giving these guys the ability to pass a little bit more on these tracks. And if you read anything or heard anything from like Denny Hamlin this week, he said it really hasn't changed much, and they could change it really easily if they just go ahead. And I think Matty Ice was talking about this actually in the Discord today. It would take 5 minutes if they just add some more horsepower to these cars and give these guys the ability to pass. So we really want to focus on on how this setup has been on these type of tracks, and Byron has done really well. Now, the knock is what we talked about. Hendricks just has not looked as good this week. So you're going to get a low on Byron. It could be a sneaky play here starting 5th. He's starting far enough up or close enough to the front where he could get you a bunch of Dom points. Christopher Bell is a co-favorite. Again, it's the JGR cars, right? I mean, they're the Toyota with Gibbs. Bell's going to be a co-favorite here, starting 13th. Obviously, has the ability to win the race and can get you a ton of dom points. So he's going to be very chalky as well. The place differential from 13 really won't matter. He's going to have to dominate and win this race or come close to it in order for him to be in the nuts at this price. And then you've got Blaney, and we'll go with Blaney again. Penske in the Fords. Blaney has really good history as well on these short tracks, and great history at this track in particular, right? So his last what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? His last 5 is second, fourth, and then if you go even further back, a 10th and a 6th. So I mean, he's done everything but get in the winner's circle. So you got to like Blaney here at 16. He's going to be kind of 20-30% owned where he's starting, and then you've got Larson again with the Hendricks starting 17th. Good history here as well, but how much do we factor in the fact that Hendricks has just not been good this weekend? He's got recent races here, a 3rd and a 4th last year, so that's really solid. So yeah, I mean, you've got a lot. I think you can make a case for all these guys up at the top. The least owned guy is going to be Byron, just because Hendrick just has not looked good, and he's starting 5th. Can he get to the front and dominate? I think he could be a sneaky play. If you're looking for someone maybe outside of the chalk who's up at the top, a guy who obviously does well at this track, Byron could be that guy that you get at a fairly low ownership. If he gets out front, anyone who gets out front early can really lead a ton of laps.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's also important to note too, like you talk about some of these guys, whether they're driving a Toyota or not. If you're wondering, well, which cars are, Chevrolet, which cars are Hendrick, right? What you can do is we also have a NASCAR team drivers page up on our site too. So if you guys are wondering, what car does, William Byron drive, right? Let's say you're new to NASCAR. He's on Team Hendrick, drives a Chevrolet, right? So Ryan Blaney, we want to kind of go into this, just kind of for example, if you're wondering, what team does he drive for? We have all that stuff available on our site. In the Fords, he's talking about Blaney, you talking about the recent history, especially in short tracks, not even just recent. He's been around for a bit, but the short track success, 11.2, maybe I have him a little bit low stats because he offers the same kind of upside as Christopher Bell. Obviously doesn't drive a Toyota. So, I gave the Toyota just a little bit more horsepower. No, but I guess it is a good point though. Starting 16th, he has the upside to get there. He's probably a little bit better of a play than Larson just because they've had better success here in terms of practice and also just coming into those recent string of results. This is interesting. So I definitely like Blaney here. But Christopher Bell and Denny Hamlin are going to be two where it's tough to get away from, right? Christopher Bell, being co-favorite, like you said, 5-1. So they're both plus 500. It shows where they think the lead lap's going to, or where the laps led are going to come from, right? Like almost a good chance that it comes from one of those two. It's tricky to me when you want to avoid them because, obviously both driving Toyotas, both in the car to have this week. What do you get different with? Because I do expect them to be very, very popular. I actually expect them both to get into the 40%. I think maybe Bell comes in slightly lower than that, but I do expect them to be two very chalky options. So if you're playing those two up top, you got to know a lot of other people are doing that too. So where can you get different? I think I mentioned it in the playbook that I think the very cookie cutter build is two guys in that 10K range almost, and then 3 guys, 9K to 7K or whatever, and then probably one or two values. Like it's a very easy build to get to. And these guys are very easy to get to in a sense too, because I think we got some really strong value in 6K range. But again, where do you get different at? I don't want to get too different off Hamlin, but maybe with Bell, like maybe I go up and spend the extra 1.2K to Blaney is a very solid way. And honestly, stats, I'm going to be off Hendrick. I'm going to trust the practice data, right? I'm going to be off Hendrick. I don't want to expand my pool too big. If they beat me, we were on them last week, right? They wanted me money. If they beat me this week, that's fine, right? But that's my stance today is I'm going to be slightly off Hendrick and more so just trying to jam in these Toyotas and Fords here. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our 9K range here as well. So a big thing about this 9K range, we have several really solid options, and I also got to add in a cat filter too. So if you guys are ever wondering how, I'm not really great with Sabre or whatever, if you guys have any questions at all, make sure to, DM, us in the Discord here at Rubio Dimes, anything like that. I also have to make a shout out to Dan, Dan1312 last night winning the MMA, what was it, 200K to first or whatever, but ended up being a chop for 48K. So shout out to Dan, shout out to the MMA content as well. It's been top tier all season. So really, really glad to see that. And while I pause, let's go ahead and move on to the 9K range here stats. So Logano, good history here, starting far back in a Ford, it's an okay play, right? But you also have Chastain here, who has had success. Obviously, this was the track that he did that wall where he ran against the wall there, right? Was that against Denny Hamlin too? So, and then obviously the one that I really, really want to talk about, Kyle Busch, starting 31st in recent years, very, very recent years. He hasn't been able to really get up to the top and dominate this track. But if you're really going to look at, data from 2015 through 2020, Kyle Busch was an absolute stud at Phoenix. I'm caught between two minds here, Stats, because usually I like to jam in the PD with Kyle Busch. The problem is, does he have enough upside to win it for me? And I'm really struggling with that because usually a guy starting 31st has a much higher projection in the car that Kyle Busch is in. The odds aren't really bullish on him, though, but I'm very curious to hear your take here.
Yeah, the odds don't look good. Right now, in the runs that I did earlier this morning, I was getting about, like mid-30s on Busch. And I'm a little hesitant on that. Like, I don't know if that car is fast enough. Generally in this price range, like you're going to want to get some Dom points. Although he's starting so far back that you should be able to get, like, if he gets up into that, that top 10, top 8, he should be able to get you in the money. But I don't know. I think he might be, I think I'm going to wind up pulling back on where I am. I think he winds up being in that 30 some odd % range. And I don't mind being a little bit under. I think you're taking a chance. I mean, I look at it like this is a really difficult track to get a lot of the guys from the to get chalky guys too, or not say chalky, but the more expensive guys from the back. I think what we're going to see is more of the cheap guys from the back be able to help us with the Dom guys up front, the really expensive guys who are going to potentially dominate this race. So I don't know. I don't think Busch has a ton of potential here to be a Dom. So in this price range, when you go to another guy who's starting a little bit of a ways back, you talked about Logano. I think he does have the potential, even starting 23rd, to get you the both Dom points and place differential. So I kind of like Logano a little bit more than I like Kyle Busch. When you look at his history here, you talked about Kyle Busch. I think that's it's almost ancient history at this point. Now he has had. In Richmond, he did have a third place last year at Richmond, but on the whole, just hasn't looked all that great on these tracks in recent history. Now, he did have an 8th last year at this track in this exact race, so the potential is there. I would lean towards the under, being underweight on Kyle Busch. I would be over a little bit more on Logano. You talk about a guy like now Truex. He's kind of the contrarian play for JGR, right? So you've got all these Toyotas and all the Joe Gibbs racing guys that are going to be really high owned. And then you've got basically a guy in the same equipment who's starting 11th, and the market is really going to be lower on him. So if you want to get involved with the Toyotas and Joe Gibbs racing, you get a guy like Truex, who has had some recent success on these flat short tracks. Phoenix, he was 6th, right, on the short track. He had a first place in New Hampshire last year, just looking, decent last year. Like I said, 6th place here last year, and then a couple, not so great finishes. I just think you have a shot. If you go a little further back to 21, he did win at this track, and he had a 2nd place at this track. So I think that's another one of those guys who's kind of going to be on the low own, who I think if you want to take a shot, you're getting him in that mid-teen range, maybe up to 20% range, and you have a chance here for a guy in some of the best equipment who has some success at these type of tracks. And then Chastain in the Chevy, I think that's the one thing again you're worried about is just necessarily beating these Toyotas, but starting 12th in a similar spot with Truex, I think he'll be higher owned than Truex. He won the race He's won in Phoenix. He won here last year, right? So I believe he won the fall race here, right? So
he won the championship race. So the first time in 10 years that I think. Yep. So
exactly.
It's interesting.
So yeah. So I mean, you've got it's an interesting group. Chastain has. I just think of all these guys, I think Kyle Busch is the least likely maybe to get you any Dom points. But of course, the fact that he's starting so far back. I'm going to lean a little bit underweight, maybe overweight on Logano, overweight on Truex, and kind of stick around the market on Chastain.
Yeah, 100%. It's also very interesting too that I just noticed is our title messed up too. I think our title is messed up. It says truck race on there.
Yes.
Yeah, well, we'll fix that here very momentarily. But I want to get my take here on the 9K range too. Very high on Logano because yes, I do think he has the potential to lead in this race, right? That's the one thing I keep coming to. I can't say the same at all for Kyle Busch. And so when I'm looking at Kyle Busch, I have a hard time doing it, but I am fading. I just am. So, I mean, I'm going to be very under. I think in cash games, though, so this is where we want to specify, what it is, right? In cash games, Kyle Busch is a very strong play. He's going to offer you a very solid floor. A 12th place finish is pretty solid. He can't go backwards from that 31st position all that much. He was very fast last week too. Obviously, completely different package. But he did show pace last week. It was a very good play last week. Ended up getting a penalty. It ended up burning the people who played it. But still, fine play. Not for me here at Phoenix. Not me on this mile track. I would not be shocked to see him finish outside the top 12. And I think he needs a top 5 at this price if he's not going to lead anything to really kind of make me pay. And I'm willing to bet against that with Kyle Busch here. Logano, I'm trusting it. I think starting 23rd, I think that the upside is there. It's almost like, obviously Kyle Busch has 8 better, PD points potential, right? Starting 31st compared to Logano's 23rd. But I think Logano can offset that, not only with finishing position, but with the dominator upside, like you mentioned. Chastain and that Chevy, I don't know. Maybe I got to project a little bit too high, too. I think I'm going to revisit these projections, push through an update right after the show, where guys like Chastain may get a slight bump down. But ultimately, Blaney will get a slight bump up, too. But Truex at 38 in that Toyota, I mean, I have a hard time not wanting to play Toyota guys, just going a little bit overweight on them because what it's going to do, it's going to get you on the right cars. It's going to get you on the cars that were fast practice. You want that. And Truex is a vet. He's a guy who can absolutely drive this thing into that top 5, and it wouldn't shock you to see him lead laps. It's a high tire wear track, too. I think Truex kind of thrives in these types of environments. I do like Truex for tournaments quite a bit. He's in that 9,800 price range, and I think I have his ownership below 20%. You look at his teammates and stuff, what Christopher Bell, with Joe Gibbs racing, you got Denny Hamlin, Joe Gibbs, and you have Ty Gibbs even. There's a chance that Truex could be the lowest owner of those guys. So if you want to get into the, still staying on the same equipment, but with less chalk, Truex is the guy there too. So I like that a lot. We'll move on to the 8K range now here. So lots to talk about in the 8K range. A lot of fun to be had. Let's go ahead and go into that. 9,000. And we got 5 drivers here between 8 and 8.5. So, or 8.8. Last week, Chase Elliott. Are we ready to just bury the hatchet on Chase Elliott? I think last week was our final chance, right?
Yeah, that was he was my play of the day, kind of sneaking. I can't hit these long shots every week, right? So
I went with you. I went with
low
you.
on guys. Yeah. That was tough. He just I think it's kind of like you got to wait and see now with Elliott. He's going to have to prove it to us again. He just hasn't done it with the next gen. With this equipment at these short tracks. He used to be really good here with the last gen cars, but this next gen car, he hasn't proven it. So obviously where he's starting, he's going to have to dominate. He's going to have to basically beat the Gibbs cars up front and get out to the lead. I just don't see that happening. So I think you're fine with a total fade or being way under on Chase Elliott this week. The guy, I think the guy who is of most interest in this range, again, it's another Toyota, but it's 2311. It's Tyler Reddick, right? So that's the guy. Again, if you want to get a play on Toyotas now. He's starting 6, but I think he's got a shot to get up into the lead. He's another guy who can easily dominate this race. I think the thing with the 2311s is I think you worry about their pits, right? So they just have not been great in the pits overall. So that's where you kind of worry about these guys, and we'll get to some of the other guys on that team. But I would be a little bit concerned there. But Reddick is the most interesting of all the guys here. Now, another guy that I find a little bit interesting, again, we're going to talk about the Toyotas and Joe Gibbs Racing, and that's Joe Gibbs' grandson, right? So Ty Gibbs starting second. Obviously, qualified well. The equipment is really good. It's just a question of, at this price, if he gets out again, I said, anyone who gets out front early in this race has the potential to dominate the entire first stage. And at 8K, if he did that, he's going to be in the winner no matter where he finishes, most likely in this race. So he's got the equipment to do it. It's just a matter of, can he beat Denny on the restart? Can he win? If there's multiple restarts here early, he's got to win one of them and get out to the front if he can do that. So, he's going to be in the nuts. Now, I think you're getting him he's another guy you're going to get at low ownership because everyone's kind of moving on to Denny. So if you want to take a shot in these GPPs, I think you have to. I think you have to look at who else can dominate this race early. You're going to need at least 2 DOMs, I think, in your builds. So, and those DOMs could easily, so that's why you could easily get someone, 2 or 3 guys starting in the top 5. So Ty Gibbs to me is an interesting play here, and I think a guy that you may want to take as a bit of a contrarian play and a guy who may potentially, like I said, lead early in this race. The other guys, you've got Buescher, who's had some success on the short tracks, and Keselowski, but they're going to be much lower owned. I think they're kind of starting in that middle range. I don't think either one of them really have much potential here to be a dominator, and I just don't see enough place differential points for them to be a factor. I don't see either one winning, so definitely a little bit lower or down on both of those guys.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting too. I believe that Gibbs is he starting in the top lane too, because I think last race it was Chandler Smith and Cole Custer. Cole Custer had the pole in the Xfinity Series, and the top line very early on had the advantage, right? I'm just making the case for Ty Gibbs here, right? I'm just going to set the table there. We know how hard it is to pass. What if that top line gets good pole? They have a little bit better traction. They're able to get out there, and all of a sudden, we know this car is fast enough. We know the Toyota's fast enough. Ty Gibbs could very easily lead stage 1 or a significant portion of it. So I don't think the Ty Gibbs love is out of bounds at all. He drove a very great race last week too. We know the talent he's capable of. We know the car he's in. Like, there's so many things that can go right for Ty Gibbs this year. And this could be one of the kind of, I wouldn't say a breakthrough moment for him, but like this could definitely be a great race for him and his team. And wouldn't shock you to see a top 5. And if he ends up leading laps at that point, it's just gravy. Like 8K could definitely be something where, for tournament wise, like I do need to bump up his ownership just because I know a lot of people are going to season a Toyota. Sabersim and I got like a 10% difference. So I'm going to rerun some of this stuff here after the show. That's very interesting.
I just think the problem is like as far as projections go, everyone's projections out there, he's going to be low just because they're anticipating a lot more laps led by Hamlin, and he's got obviously no place differential upside. So that's why I think his ownership will be a little suppressed.
Yeah, I think like you're obviously expecting him to go a little bit backwards, right? And maybe not, but his odds to win were very dramatically like increased after qualifying and stuff too. So like at least that's kind of offsetting that. 32 isn't terrible for a guy starting second, and especially if you loop him into like a Dom pool group where like you have Denny Hamlin, you got the Toyotas grouped up together, right? I want at least 3 Toyotas on this slate. Not that I think you have to make that rule or whatever, but like stuff like that can get you a little bit more Ty Gibbs, can get you a little bit more Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick's a great play here at 23-11. Like I cored one of their drivers today. Like, you cored one of their drivers today. Like we really like the Toyotas. I'm going to keep harping that, right? We got 30 minutes left in the show. You can get annoyed with me when I say it here a few more times, but like there's no reason to really go away from them. Reddick, Gibbs, Chase Elliott, you're out. I'm not going to play Chase Elliott. He's got to prove it. Last year we gave him the excuse of the broken leg or whatever like that. He doesn't have that excuse this year. It's done. He's got to show it now. Starting third, great. I'm not taking the risk on it. Keselowski, Buescher, They're just kind of guys where they fit, that's fine. But really, are you getting as much upside as you are with Gibbs or Reddick? And the answer to me is no. So let's go ahead and move on to the 7K range. There's a lot to talk about the 7K range. And I also just want to mention, too, when we do this, we'll have a lot to talk about bets afterwards as well. And we'll also have our play of the days at the end of the show. We still got 30 minutes left, guys. But once we get through all the drivers and the salaries, we'll go over some of the best bets. And then we'll kind of jump into our plays of the day as well. BG3, what do y'all have Gibbs ownership projection? I had him in the teens. It's going to rise probably a little bit. I didn't have a ton of projections when I did it last night, so I wasn't able to get a true consensus of the field, see what was being pushed or whatnot. But Gibbs definitely seems like he has potentially get steamed up, but we'll see here. I bet Gibbs at plus 1,600. Jake Swales, that's awesome. I do think that's a solid bet today, but I know that we'll get to the bets a little bit later on as well. Let's go ahead and jump into the 7K range as well. You know, there's another Toyota sitting here at 7,700, 2311 stats. You know, you talk about the pit crew. Let's go ahead and lead off with Bubba Wallace. Let's talk about the pit crew concerns. We know the equipment's there. What do you think about Bubba overall?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like Bubba. I feel a little bit better about taking these guys who are, further down on the 2311 team. So Bubba's really, I think the equipment's good. I like Bubba on these type of tracks. It's just going to really be all down to the pit crew. I think he's going to be in that 20 to 25% range. I don't think you want to go too crazy and go too far over that. So if you like Bubba here and you want to take him at 30%, I'm cool with that. I wouldn't go much harder than that on him. And then the guy at the top of the range price wise, Briscoe's been great on these short tracks, but he's starting today in the 8th position. Can he get up front? He's going to really have to dominate. I don't know if he's got that dominator potential with some of these other cars in there, the other Toyotas that are up in there. So I think that's going to really suppress his ownership. I don't expect him to be owned all that high, even with his success here. He's going to really have to dominate and show that success that he has in the past. He's got a ton of top 10s in his last 6 or 7 races here on these type of tracks. I think the most interesting guy for me is buried down at 7,200, right? So, starting 36th, I think this is where, it's still a little expensive. It's not really I wouldn't necessarily call that a punt play, but it's a little pricey. But I think at that price or at that starting position, I think Berry is going to be intriguing. I think he gets, he's in great equipment, right? So he's in the old Harvick equipment, I believe.
Yes.
Right. So he's not quite the driver of Harvick, but he's got pretty good equipment. And so starting 36, we know, the odds are he's not going backwards. If we could get him up in the top 20, which I think he has the potential of doing, we could see Berry in there. So we don't get a lot of guys who start this deep make it into the winning lineups on at this track. But I think there's a very good potential here for Berry to do that. Then you've got Bowman, again, the Hendrick Racing. He starts 25th, so that makes him a lot more intriguing. So kind of track history here. Starting 25th, I think he's going to be probably higher owned than maybe I necessarily want, because he's got that place differential potential and only 7,500. He's probably going to be in the mid 20s. If you want to be right around the mark, I'm going to be, in that 20 to 25%. I'm not going to go crazy under, but I don't want to really be all that much over on Bowman. I think right around the field is going to be fine on him. Eric Jones is a guy here. This is interesting. My initial runs, I really wasn't using much. I wasn't getting a lot of Jones. He's probably not going to be high owned, but you've got to respect the fact it's kind of a Graxon situation. Last week, he was the best in practice. He had the best car in practice. I think, again, this is Toyota, but this is Legacy. I don't know if people are giving Legacy the credit right now for the equipment that they have. I think he could be Eric Jones could be sneaky. I mean, I was basically, he's starting 4th. That's obviously why he's going to be low owned. But again, if you could find that guy up front, and you have another Toyota up there, if you could find the guy up front, he starts on the 2nd row. And like you said, I believe they're starting up on the top, right? He's going to start on the top.
Yes, yeah.
behind Gibbs.
Starting fourth. Yes. So he'll start on the
Yeah.
top. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's the potential there. Again, a low guy. I kind of like Gibbs a little bit more. I prefer the guy starting in that second spot. And I was really just kind of a full fade on Briscoe. On Jones. But I may sprinkle in a little bit. You don't have to go crazy if you're a MME guy. I think if you get 5% there on Jones, I think you're okay. I wouldn't really.
I think he comes in pretty highly owned stats. I do.
You think he comes in high? I don't think he comes in that high.
I think it definitely gets into the teens at the bare minimum, because I think a lot of people are going to see. You notice this range, right? We can talk about Josh Berry, right? Stewart Haas racing has not been great, but great PD, right? I think what we have seen too to start the year, like just looking at ownership from previous races, that some of these guys in like the top 10 and top 5 still get like a little bit of ownership, and especially Eric Jones's practice time. Like people are going to notice that, and I think Sabre even had him in the 20s too.
Okay, I didn't see it.
I think I might bump it down just a tad too, because I'm kind of in agreement with you. Like, it's not the sexy play, right? But Jones has burned how many people, how many times? Like, it feels like you get burned by Jones multiple times a season. He's already burned us once, starting near the back. But I do think that the Toyotas just get steam overall, and I think a lot of these Toyotas just overall, like I said, they're a great car. Yeah, I think they all get a little bit of ownership. So I do think he is going to come in a little higher end than expected.
I think if he comes in at 20%, I think you'd be happy to be under, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, you just can't get over that. So I think you take your chances. If he's going to be 20%, I mean, that means to me, Gibbs is going to be, maybe not as owned as I thought. I'd be happy with that scenario. So you think who comes in higher owned then? Who do you guys have? Who do you have? Gibbs or Jones?
Jones because of price, but it does need to be Gibbs. I think it does need to be Gibbs. I think that might be flipped a little bit here after the show. I'll put through an update. And a big reason why Jones is also getting a little bit of ownership here, stats too, is that the odds to win in this range are by far the best. I think he is 28-1, and the next closest, like, he has better odds than Bubba Wallace and Chase Briscoe, right? Both in this range. And then he has the best odds of anyone below him pricing wise. So that's going to contribute that. The odds to win for Eric Jones are, very solid at 28-1. And I think that's going to kind of contribute it. And just for comparison, right? Obviously, you're playing one for PD, you're playing one, and you're hoping that he wins. But Josh Berry is 200 to win on DraftKings. And Eric Jones is 28-1. It's like logically, you're like, oh man, like Eric Jones, like twice the play, right? Not that a lot of people incorporate win odds when they're doing their lineups or whatever, but that does like kind of have a little bit of a factor into that ownership as well. But overall, like you mentioned it, Stewart Haas Racing had a couple fast cars, right? Like Chase Briscoe got top 10. Gragson got top 10 in qualifying as well. Gragson was great last week. There's an outlier here, and his name is Josh Berry, starting 36th. That's Stewart Haas car. And it's probably faster this week than it has been in the previous weeks. I know there's a lot of hate on Josh Berry. I don't think a lot of that is warranted. I know that his rise to where he got the Chase Elliott ride last year and stuff. I know a lot of people didn't love it, but he's still got a decent equipment. I still think he's a decent driver. I do like that PD play there quite a bit. I did want to, I'll save my Bubba thing. We got our playbook up. We got everything up there too. We got our Discord too. If you guys want to reach out to us, we're always active in the Discord. Code NASCAR 15% off the racing package, and not just the racing package. If you are a March Madness fan, if you're an NBA fan, or if you're even an MLB fan, with the MLB season starting 3 weeks away, we'll have everything covered too. So if you guys are wanting one sport or all sports, we got it completely dialed across the board. So Bubba Wallace, my take is in the playbook, everything around that. I will give my take on Alex Bowman though. I'm out on Alex Bowman. I'm going to treat him almost like Chase Elliott in a way. What have you done for me lately, Alex? The answer is nothing. He was mediocre last week. And we knew what cars Hendrick had. You saw Larson dominate the race. Where are you, Alex Bowman? What have you done? And the answer is absolutely nothing. And you know what? He is starting 25th because he belongs in 25th. I don't think I have any love for him at all. I don't think he has the upside to drive it up there. You know what? So a lot of people are going to look at 7,500 and be like, he's an easy click, right? I think he is going to be extremely chalky because people still associate that car with being fast. People still associate Alex Bowman with being good. And honestly, this is harsh. I get it. He hasn't been good. And so I would much rather have Bubba. I'd much rather have Barry. I'd even much rather have Jones. Briscoe's the one guy that I can probably have one-on-one. And Suarez, I'm out on this race. But Bowman, good PD, high ownership. That's a guy that I'm taking a heavy stand against, though, here this week. Anything else that you want to touch on in this range stats?
No, I think we got all of it.
Perfect. So let's go ahead and move on to the 6K range. So lots to like in the 6K range. The 6K range is arguably one of the most interesting ranges of the season. And you might be wondering, why do you say that? Well, we don't have a ton of like clear value, but we have a ton of very fast practice pace. And that practice pace belonged to Austin Cindric and John Hunter Nemechek, both guys who are absolutely rapid in practice. Let's go ahead and throw it down to Ryan Preece, Stewart Haas Racing. You had Gragson, you had Briscoe, very fast. Barry's fun in qualifying. Preece probably in a little bit better of a car than the starting spot suggests. All right, Carson Hocevar starting top 10, Gragson starting 7th. There's a lot of good pieces, and I also really want your take on Corey LaJoie too, because he has been someone that we have constantly had to talk about, and he has gotten ownership every single week, and that's not going to change this week either. So go ahead and give me your deep dive into this 6K range, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, this is going to be some of the higher owned guys. I mean, Preece is basically a specialist at these type of tracks. So you're starting 27th. He's just going to be one of those guys that you're probably going to want at 6,900. This is his type. Like I said, this is his type of track. He specializes in these. Again, I don't know where your ownership falls in him, but I have Preece pretty high. I'm using quite a bit of Preece. So I think he easily gets into the top. He could get in the top teens, and I think that could be good. But Dillon's another guy who consistently kind of finishes here in that 10 to 15 range. So he's another guy at a similar price, starting even further back in 30th, which I think makes him just a little bit higher owned. So two guys who are going to be relatively high, 25 to 35% owned. That we start off with at 6,900 and 6,800. I think both guys are going to be up there. It's just going to be a matter of, do they avoid any carnage or anything like that? But I think we've got two quality plays there. When you get down to McDowell, I think you can kind of totally fade McDowell. Starts too high. I don't see any upside there. I don't think he has the ability to give us any dom points. Gragson in a similar fashion, starting way too high, starting 7th. Now you mentioned John Hunter Nemechek, one of the best practice, right? I think he ranked 3rd in practice this week. So that could be a sneaky again, Toyota could be a really sneaky car. I think maybe his ownership gets bumped up from where I originally thought here, but starting 19th, is going to be lower owned certainly than Preece and Dillon, and I think could be a sneaky play. Don't be shocked if John Hunter Nemechek makes his way into a winning lineup here as one of the lower owned guys. I think then you get down to like a Stenhouse, who I think you could pretty much pass on. I've got no confidence there on Stenhouse. But then you mentioned a couple of guys who are going to be high owned, and that's LaJoie and Cindric, and they're starting way back. So for cash, certainly you're looking at guys like this, but even GPPs, these guys are going to be high owned. Both of these guys have the potential to drive this thing up into the teens at a really low price. And you're going to have to pair these guys. We're going to need some real expensive guys. So we've got to look. And when we don't really have guys in that the sub 6K range that we're going to really like, this is about as low as we're going to go here on LaJoie and Cindric. So their ownership gets bumped up just for the sheer fact that no one's going to like any of these guys in the 5K range. So when we're looking at 6K, these are the two lowest guys. They're starting 34th and 35th. Tons of place differential upside. I think LaJoie and Cindric are going to be two of the higher owned guys. I like both of them. So being overweight on quite frankly, being over on any of these guys in this range, I think is fine. And I do like LaJoie and Cindric quite a bit, just because of where they're starting. I think you got a little bit more upside. I think the potential is there for those guys to score a lot of points, and you're going to need it because like I said, we're going to need at least 2 DOMs, maybe even 3, and we're going to be spending up to get that. So we're going to have to go down, and that's as far down as I really want to go on this slate.
Yeah, this is a really good debate on Corey LaJoie, right? Like, I think Sabre has him at 6% owned or something like that. I think it's going to be way high.
No, it's going to be high.
Yeah, like starting 35th, already has 2 really good results under his belt, right? Last week started 17th and was still high owned. Like LaJoie was still chalk starting 17th, and now he's starting 35th. I know the finish last week was great. This is the week where I think you see that ownership peak on him, right? Then it'll kind of go back to earth. But right now, he's got good results. He's got a good game log, really. He's got a great starting spot. He's in a great price range. I think he is going to be really chalk. It's a play that I don't want to make stats, but I'm like almost forced to. Like I look at it where I like Cindric 10 times more than LaJoie. But if you told me who else do you like 10 times more than LaJoie in this range without going too high up to like Priest or Dillon, like maybe Nemechek I like a little bit more, but then there's not a whole lot of options. We run out of options pretty fast, and that's why LaJoie is going to get a lot of steam. Not someone that I really want to go out of my way to play, but if he's in a combo of my last 2v2 in the main lineup, yeah, I might click it. But the guy I really want in this range, Austin Cindric. The Cindric play reminds me a lot of Gragson last week. I think Gragson was really fast in practice, really poor in qualifying. You know who is that this week? It's Austin Cindric. Really fast in practice, really poor in qualifying. Would it shock you to see a top 20? No, it would. And starting 34th, we don't need much more than a top 20 here. And like, you know, we got gravy points with Gragson last week. I'm not expecting a top 10 from anyone starting back here, but Cindric, absolutely fine here. Like him a lot. Your mention of Priest, this is his style of track, right? This is definitely a style of track. You know, I do like that, and I do like the Stewart Haas a little bit more this week than previous weeks too. So I can definitely join you on that one. Austin Dillon's a very good point too, but I think Nemechek's the last one that I'll really kind of dive in on as well. We got our full sheet up on the website. We have our core plays, smash plays, underweights, fades, and everything else that you can ask for, along with the race breakdown below. So be sure to check it out on the Run For Your Sports website. Again, NASCAR 15% off the racing package or any package of your choosing. Nemechek kind of falls in that same foot as Cindric, right? You know, starting a little bit higher, 15 spots higher, but I don't think it would shock me to see Nemechek get a top 15 here. And for the price, top 15, I'll take it. So definitely kind of want to, open your eyes to, my struggle in NASCAR DFS stats is that I want the PD guys, right? Like I'm automatically gravitated toward the guys starting 30th and back, right? But what I've been doing, and this has been a weakness of mine, I've tried to correct it, is I'll see a guy like, well, we'll throw a name out last night, Leland Honeyman. Obviously, there's a ton of wrecks in Xfinity or whatever, but I'm debating, do I go Leland Honeyman or do I go a guy like Ryan Ellis, Garrett Smithley? Like, they ended up working out, but Leland Honeyman still was able to drive that car to 20th, and it's better than a 30th place finish from one of those guys, even though they might rise a few more spots higher. And then Nemechek kind of falls into that bill of a guy that I might want to get a little bit higher on, despite a starting position inside the top 20. So last bit, I don't know if we have many drivers.
Well, one thing I would just want to jump in on that price range is just look at the odds, right? So Cindric right now is just like way better odds than LaJoie and even better than Nemechek. So you got to take that into consideration. And I'm sure a lot of people will be looking at that when they're making their builds as well. So that's really that's telling me that he's just going to be higher owned, especially from where he's starting than those other guys. So the Nemechek I don't think is going to be very, very high owned. That's why I think he's kind of sneaky and you do have some potential there. But I actually like Nemechek a little bit more than LaJoie.
I think that Cindric will be the highest owned driver below 7K, and I don't think it's even going to be close. So kind of pivoting off that might not be the worst move. I'll just go ahead and throw it out there. I mean, it's no secret, especially with some of this chalk or whatever. I think Cindric, great play. I think he can get it steamed into the 30s. Like I genuinely think that, yeah, like you said, the win odds, the starting position, the speed in practice. Who do we see it? Well, Gragson was very high on last week, right? Like it was kind of funny. Priest too, in a sense. Like I got to pull up these, the race, but there was a ton of guys who just got steamed up and coming in a little higher end than expected. Gragson 30% last week, so I think the same thing happens with Cindric. And we'll go ahead and move on to the 6K range. So that's a great point. And kind of pivoting off that chalk, not I think Cindric is pretty good chalk here, but definitely worth noting moving forward. Last bit, what do we got? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 drivers here. 7 drivers that I don't really love. Zane Smith, Well, he was the first one out last week, right? He was the first one to kind of leave the track, DNF early, or no, he got, what was it, multiple laps early or whatever. But he's in a Chevrolet. Not really loving him, but you can say the same thing about a lot of guys in this range, right? Like, I think the highest owned driver in this range is going to be Justin Haley, purely for name brand. Then Gilliland, who has put in a few good performances, will probably be around the second highest owned in this range. And then otherwise, it's a bunch of forgettable guys, really. Like, not a whole lot of guys that you want at their starting positions. Maybe Haley and just Gilliland, maybe Zane Smith. What's your take stats?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much nailed it. Like I said earlier when we were talking about the 6K guys, I mean, that's part of the reason everything's going to be falling on a guy like Cindric, because I think that's about as low as people want to go for salary. Once you get down sub 6K, it's slim pickings. I mean, these guys are starting too high. Hemrick starting 21st. You've got Burton starting 24th. Like, you just can't play him. Kraus, 26. You just can't play these guys. I think the only one, like you mentioned, if you potentially want to punt with Haley and take a shot here at the 5,200, if you need to squeeze in some salary, I think that's the only way that you're going to see one of those guys get in there, where maybe they don't necessarily score a bunch, but it's just going to be some of the guys that we have up at the top. Like, they just score so many points, like, Larson, somehow you get like three guys who are in that really high salary range. And then we've got to get some salary savers where they don't necessarily have to do much in the way of scoring. That's the only way. So in MME, if you want to sprinkle in a few, I don't see it though. I don't see any of these guys really making it into the winning lineup down here in the sub 6K, 5K range.
So this is a very good discussion, right? Like, you mentioned it, what if we did get like three really crazy good Doms, right? And Andrew B puts that in the chat too. If it makes your Doms fits, you can absolutely get away with it. I agree. I do. I like I said, I'm not comfortable with LaJoy. Like, if I was uncomfortable with LaJoy, God, I don't love playing Justin Haley. But what if I wanted to say I need to save 1.1K? What does the Justin Haley lineup look like? I wish I didn't show that one stats. That's a pretty good lineup right there. That's punting a position. I mean, at the end of the day, are you going to get more than 20 from Justin Haley? The answer is probably no. But it does get you 5 pretty decent good plays, right? Like, if you just scroll down this list, it's kind of what it opens up. This build, no shot I'm ever playing Zane Smith and Justin Haley together. I think at a good group to make on Sabre, at most one of the 5K range drivers or 5K range drivers. I don't think you need to go above that at all. You don't want two of these guys here in the same lineup, personally. But you saw what Justin Haley's in my top team. It's worth something. I mean, it is worth a discussion there. I mean, it would take a lot to go right for that to be the winner. I absolutely would take a lot to go right. But at the same time, it does maximize your upside with the Doms a little bit more. So I can definitely see both sides, but I think it would almost have to be a pure punt. Like, I'd much rather have Cindric or Nemechek or even guys like Freese and Dillon rather than dipping into this 5K range quite a bit. So let's move on to the best bets for the day. So I want to I don't know if you posted yours yet, but we have a Discord here that posts every single bet, basically that the entire team makes. So it's been a lot of fun. Do you have an idea? Because I see it's not in there yet, but do you have an idea of maybe your favorite bet, or do you want to wait on that, or maybe hold out on it here?
Yeah, I'm waiting. I'm waiting on my bet. So to me, this is a tough one. Like, obviously the chalky plays up at the top are interesting. Hamlin 550. Is it enough? Like, is plus 550 enough value there for me to pull the trigger on that? This is one of those where usually I like to take like maybe 3-4 guys. I just don't. I think it's going to be a fairly chalk winner. I think if you want to dive deep, maybe you take a shot on Ty Gibbs at plus 1,800. So I think if you want a long shot play, I think that would be the play I suggest. But otherwise, I might just play one guy here, and I'm struggling right now to figure out who that's going to be, because I don't want to, if I'm taking some of the favorites, I don't want to make too many plays here, because now I'm just risking too much, and it's not worth it. If I take a lot of dogs like I have in some of the other races, I will play more. So if for the dogs, I don't mind Ty Gibbs down here at plus 1,800. That's a guy I like, or even a Logano at plus 1,200. But I think I'm kind of leaning towards going with one of the favorites, and I'll post that over in the Discord for the subs in the bets chat.
Perfect. So please hit the like and subscribe, guys. We greatly appreciate it. We're going to go over our plays of the day here very shortly. But yes, if you guys could hit the like button, subscribe, we'd greatly appreciate it. It helps us out quite a bit. I think, we're close enough to the top of the hour. So one thing that I want to note, we do our plays of the day, right? We kind of go off the wall. You do a little bit more than me in terms of, ownership. I'm going to join you in that. All right. We're going to make a rule using the RPS ownership projection. So this is going to be tougher, right? We all know the good plays, right? We can talk about the chalk. We can recommend Denny Hamlin and Christopher Bell all day long, right? I want to make this a little bit more challenging. All right. I want to go under 20% with the RPS ownership, top play of the day. So that's the one rule I'm making, under 20% in the RPS ownership. I'll put it right next to it right there. And who is your guy today that you won't get much ownership at all?
I'm going Ty Gibbs. I mean, that was the guy I think the long shot bet. And for the reasons I mentioned earlier, I think you've got enough potential where he gets out front. Whoever gets out front is not going to get past. So give me a guy who's going to be low owned, starting in the front row, and with great equipment. I'll take a shot here. If he gets out front, a lot of people are going to be pissed off with their lineups because he's going to be accumulating points and he's going to be hurting quite a few people. So I'll take a shot here on Ty Gibbs as my low-owned guy to make it into the winner.
Love it. I'm also going to go with another Toyota. Surprise, surprise. John Hunter Nemechek. I think Nemechek starting 19th will go overlooked by many. I think there's for good reason. The 6K range is strong, but if you guys want someone who's going to come in a little bit lower owned, offer just as much good upside in terms of what his practice speeds were, what he's capable of. We know how good of a driver he can be at times too. Nemechek's my guy, along with Ty Gibbs. A couple, I wouldn't say youngins or whatever, but a couple guys who have been absolutely dominant in the lower series, over the past few years. So should be fun. Nemechek and Ty Gibbs, the low-owned plays of the day. Join us here at Run Pure Sports, code NASCAR 15% off your first payment here at RPS. Be sure to join, and hopefully, if we don't win, if we're not winners of the 100K today, then I hope it's one of y'all. Have a great rest of your day, and bye-bye.